The woman with dirt-stained fingers and a heart too stubborn to bend said no to a marriage proposal worth more than her entire bloodline, and she didn't even know she'd just refused a king. Thea Winters wiped the soil from her hands onto her already filthy apron, the scent of roses and lavender clinging to her skin as she arranged the last bouquet of the evening. Her flower shop, tucked between a bakery and a used bookstore on Harmon Street, had been her grandmother's before it became hers. The wooden sign above the door read "Winter's Blooms" in faded gold letters, and the windows were perpetually fogged with the humidity required to keep the more delicate specimens alive. It wasn't much, but it was hers, every struggling petal an overdue bill. The bell above the door chimed, and Thea glanced up, expecting Mrs. Chen coming for her weekly carnations. Instead, a man stood in the doorway, and the air itself seemed to shift around him. He was tall, impossibly so, with hair so pale it looked like moonlight had been spun into silk. His skin held the same ethereal quality, luminous and smooth as marble, and his eyes were the color of smoke and storms. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, tailored so precisely it seemed painted onto his frame. Everything about him screamed wealth, power, and something else she couldn't quite name, something that made her pulse quicken, and her instincts whisper danger. "We're closing soon," Thea said, her voice steady despite the strange flutter in her chest. "But I can help you find something quickly." The man's lips curved into a small smile, and he stepped further into the shop. His movements were fluid, predatory grace wrapped in civility. "I'm not here for flowers." "Then you're in the wrong shop." Thea turned back to her bouquet, tucking baby's breath between the roses with practiced efficiency. She'd learned long ago not to be intimidated by men in expensive suits. They bled money and arrogance in equal measure, and she had no patience for either. "I'm exactly where I need to be." His voice was deep, accented with something old-world and aristocratic. "My name is Icarus Falke, and I've come to speak with you, Thea Winters." Her hands stilled. "How do you know my name? I make it my business to know things." He moved closer, and she caught his scent, rain and cedar and something metallic underneath, like copper pennies. "I've been watching you for some time." Thea set down her shears and turned to face him fully, one hand drifting to the phone in her apron pocket. "That's a creepy thing to admit to a stranger. You have 10 seconds to tell me what you want before I call the police." Icarus stopped, holding up one pale hand in a gesture of peace. "I apologize, that came out poorly. I'm not here to harm you. Quite the opposite." He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "I'm here to ask you to marry me." For a moment, Thea could only stare. Then she laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "You're insane. I'm quite serious. You don't even know me." "I know more than you think." Icarus reached into his jacket and withdrew a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a ring that stole the breath from her lungs, a massive diamond surrounded by smaller stones that glittered like captured stars. "I know you've run this shop alone since your grandmother died 3 years ago. I know you work 16-hour days and still barely make rent. I know you donate flowers to the hospital every week even though you can't afford it. I know you're kind, stubborn, and far too proud to ask for help when you need it." The accuracy of his words sent ice down her spine. "That doesn't give you the right to propose marriage like you're buying produce at a market. I'm offering you security, stability, everything you need to not just survive but thrive." He held out the ring. "Marry me, and you'll never worry about money again. Your shop will flourish. You can donate flowers to every hospital in the city if you wish." Thea's hands clenched into fists. "I don't know what kind of women you're used to dealing with, but I'm not for sale. Take your ring and your condescension and get out of my shop." Something flickered in Icarus's eyes, surprise perhaps, or respect. He closed the box slowly. "You're refusing me." Give the man a medal for his observational skills. No one refuses me. "Well, congratulations on experiencing a first." Thea pointed toward the door. "Now leave before I make good on that police threat." For a long moment Icarus simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he inclined his head in a gesture that seemed strangely formal, almost courtly. "As you wish, but I'll return. Please don't." He smiled again, and this time there was something predatory in it, something that reminded her of wildlife documentaries about apex predators. "I'm afraid I must. Good evening, Thea Winters." He left, and the shop suddenly felt too warm, too small, as if his presence had expanded to fill every corner, and his absence left a vacuum. Thea's hands were shaking as she locked the door behind him, her heart hammering against her ribs. What the hell had just happened? She tried to put the bizarre encounter out of her mind as she finished closing up the shop. But Icarus Falke's face kept floating through her thoughts. Those strange, storm-colored eyes. That inhuman grace. The absolute certainty in his voice when he'd said he would return. Thea walked home, through streets painted orange by streetlights, her apartment 6 blocks away in a building that had seen better decades. She climbed 3 flights of stairs, unlocked 2 deadbolts, and collapsed onto her threadbare couch with a sigh that came from her bones. Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend Mira. "Coffee tomorrow? I have so much drama to tell you." Thea smiled despite her exhaustion and typed back a confirmation. Normal. She needed normal right now, needed to wash away the strangeness of pale men with marriage proposals and too much money. She fell asleep on the couch still wearing her dirt-stained clothes, and dreamed of smoke-colored eyes and voices that promised forever. The next morning Thea woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. Heavy paper, cream-colored, with her name written in elegant script across the front. She opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a simple card that read, "I meant what I said, think about it." Beneath the card was a check with enough zeros to make her vision swim. More than enough to pay off her debts, renovate the shop, and live comfortably for a year. Thea tore the check into pieces and threw it in the trash. She met Mira at their usual coffee shop, a cramped little place called The Grind that served burnt coffee and the best blueberry muffins in the city. Myra was already there, her dark curls pulled into a messy bun, eyes bright with gossip. "You look terrible," Myra said by way of greeting. "Good morning to you too." Thea slumped into the chair across from her and gratefully accepted the coffee Mira had already ordered for her. "I didn't sleep well. Bad dreams? Weird night." Thea hesitated, then decided she needed to tell someone. "A man came into the shop yesterday and proposed to me." Mira's eyes went wide. "What? Who?" "Complete stranger. Said his name was Icarus Falke. He knew all this information about me, offered me a huge diamond ring, told me I'd never have to worry about money again." "That's either incredibly romantic or incredibly serial killer-y." Mira leaned forward. "What did he look like?" "Gorgeous, unnaturally so. Pale hair, pale skin, expensive suit. Moved like a dancer." Thea wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, seeking warmth. "I told him no, obviously. The whole thing was insane." "Icarus Falke," Mira repeated slowly. "That name sounds familiar. Wait." She pulled out her phone and started typing frantically. Her face went pale. "Thea. Oh my God, Thea." "What?" Mira turned her phone around. On the screen was a Society page article with a photograph that made Thea's stomach drop. Icarus Falke looking exactly as he had in her shop, standing in a ballroom surrounded by people in evening wear. The headline read, "Reclusive billionaire Icarus Falke makes rare public appearance." "He's not just rich," Mira whispered. "He's stupid rich. Like could buy a small country rich. He owns half the real estate in the city. Maybe the whole state. No one knows exactly how much he's worth because his finances are so private, but there are rumors." She scrolled frantically. "People say he's part of some old European family, that he owns companies and properties all over the world, that he never ages." "Never ages?" Thea repeated. "It's probably just good genes and better plastic surgery. But look." Mira pulled up another photo, this one from a newspaper dated 15 years ago. Icarus looked identical, not a day younger or older. There are pictures of him going back decades. He looks exactly the same in all of them. Thea's skin prickled with unease. "That's impossible." "I know, but look at this." Mira found another photo, then another. In each one, Icarus Falke looked precisely the same, ageless, unchanging, immortal. "There has to be an explanation," Thea said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was remembering the way he moved, the predatory grace, the metallic scent underneath the cedar. The way her instincts had screamed danger even as her heart raced. Maybe they're relatives, a family resemblance. For 40 years? Thea had no answer for that. She spent the rest of the day distracted, nearly ruining 2 arrangements and overwatering the orchids. Every time the shop door opened, she jumped, half expecting to see Icarus's pale figure in the doorway. But he didn't come. The day passed normally, quietly, and by closing time Thea had almost convinced herself she'd overreacted. Then she stepped outside to lock up and found him waiting across the street. He was leaning against a black car that probably cost more than her building, his white hair catching the dying sunlight. When he saw her, he straightened and crossed the street with that unnerving fluid grace. "I asked you not to come back," Thea said, keeping her voice steady. "And I told you I would." Icarus stopped a respectful distance away, but she could still feel the weight of his presence, the strange magnetic pull he seemed to exert. "Have you thought about my offer? I tore up your check. I can write another. I don't want your money." Thea met his eyes, forcing herself not to look away even though holding his gaze felt like staring into a storm. "I don't want anything from you. I want you to leave me alone." "I can't do that." "Why?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "Why me? You're apparently richer than God. You could have anyone. Why are you fixating on a florist who can barely keep her lights on?" Icarus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, almost gentle. "Because you're kind. Because you give even when you have nothing." Because you look at flowers like they're miracles. And you treat your customers like family. Because in a world full of people who would do anything for power or wealth, you threw my check in the trash without a second thought. He took a step closer. Because you're real, Thea, and real is a rarity in my world. Despite herself, Thea felt something in her chest tighten. That's a pretty speech, but it doesn't change anything. I'm not marrying a stranger no matter how good his reasons sound. Then let me stop being a stranger. Icarus's hand moved to his pocket, and for a moment she thought he'd pull out that ring box again. Instead, he withdrew a simple business card. Have dinner with me one evening. Let me show you who I am. If after that you still want nothing to do with me, I'll leave you alone. You have my word. Thea stared at the card. Every instinct told her to refuse, to walk away, to put as much distance as possible between herself and this strange, unsettling man. But another part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, was curious, drawn to him despite her better judgment. One dinner, she heard herself say, and then you leave me alone. Icarus's smile was radiant. One dinner, I'll pick you up Friday evening. 8 o'clock? I'll meet you wherever we're going. I'm not giving you my address. The Sapphire Room. Do you know it? Thea's eyebrows rose. The Sapphire Room was the most exclusive restaurant in the city, the kind of place that required reservations months in advance and a dress code that probably cost more than her monthly income. I can't afford. You're my guest, please. He pressed the card into her hand, his fingers cool against her skin. Friday, 8 o'clock. I promise you won't regret it. He was gone before she could respond, sliding into his expensive car and disappearing into traffic like smoke. Thea looked down at the card in her hand. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. Just his name and a phone number. What was she doing? Friday arrived too quickly and too slowly at once. Thea spent the entire day anxious, second-guessing her decision 100 times. Mira had insisted on helping her get ready, arriving at her apartment with makeup and a dress she claimed Thea had to borrow. You're having dinner with a billionaire, Mira said, attacking Thea's hair with a curling iron. You can't show up in your flower shop clothes. Maybe I should cancel. Absolutely not. This is the most exciting thing that's happened to either of us in years. Mira spun her around to face the mirror. Look at you. You're gorgeous. Thea barely recognized herself. The dress was deep blue, simple but elegant, falling to just above her knees. Mira had done something magical with her hair, taming her usual mess of brown waves into soft curls. She looked like someone who belonged in a place like the Sapphire Room. She looked like someone who might deserve the attention of a man like Icarus Falke. The thought made her uncomfortable. She pushed it away. The Sapphire Room occupied the top floor of one of the city's oldest and most prestigious hotels. Thea gave her name to the hostess, who smiled warmly and led her through a restaurant that looked like something from a movie. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. Every table was full of beautiful people in expensive clothes, their laughter soft and cultured. Icarus was waiting at a private table near the windows. He stood when he saw her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. You're stunning, he said simply. You clean up pretty well yourself. It was an understatement. He wore another suit, this one midnight blue, and in the dim lighting of the restaurant his pale hair seemed to glow. He looked like something from a fairy tale, too beautiful to be entirely human. He pulled out her chair and Thea sat, hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. A waiter appeared immediately with wine, and Icarus ordered for both of them in what sounded like perfect French. So, Thea said when they were alone again, you promised to show me who you are. Start talking. Icarus's mouth quirked. Direct, I appreciate that. He took a sip of his wine. What would you like to know? Everything. Why you're so rich, why you don't age in photographs, why you decided to propose to a complete stranger. She leaned forward. And don't give me vague answers or pretty speeches. I want the truth. The truth. Icarus set down his glass, his expression growing serious. The truth is complicated and dangerous. Are you certain you want to hear it? I wouldn't have asked if I didn't. He studied her face for a long moment as if weighing something in his mind. Finally, he spoke, his voice low enough that she had to lean closer to hear. My family is very old. We've accumulated wealth over centuries through careful investment and strategic acquisitions. The reason I look the same in photographs spanning decades is excellent genetics and a very good skincare routine. It was a smooth lie, delivered perfectly. Thea might have believed it if she hadn't been watching his eyes. There was something there, a flicker of something that told her he was holding back. You're lying, she said quietly. Icarus's eyebrows rose. Am I? Yes, I don't know why, but you are. She sat back. So much for honesty. Some truths are dangerous to speak aloud, especially in public places. His gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. But I can show you if you're brave enough. After dinner, Show me who I really am. The words sent a shiver down her spine, equal parts fear and anticipation. Why do I feel like I'm making a deal with the devil? Icarus's smile was sharp. Perhaps you are. Dinner arrived course after exquisite course, but Thea barely tasted any of it. They talked about safer things, her shop, his businesses, their favorite books and movies. Icarus was surprisingly easy to talk to once she pushed past her nervousness. He was intelligent, well-read, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh despite herself. By the time dessert arrived, Thea had almost forgotten her unease. Almost. Are you ready? Icarus asked as the waiter cleared their plates. For what? The truth. He stood and offered his hand. Come with me. Thea hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. His skin was cool, his grip strong and sure. He led her out of the restaurant past the curious stares of other diners, into a private elevator that required a key to operate. Where are we going? Thea asked as the elevator descended. Somewhere we can talk without being overheard. Icarus was watching the floor numbers, his expression unreadable. Somewhere I can show you what words can't explain. The elevator opened onto an underground parking garage, empty except for Icarus's black car. He led her to it, opened the passenger door with old-fashioned courtesy. Thea's instincts were screaming now, warning her that getting into a car with this man was dangerous, possibly stupid, but curiosity won out over caution. She slid into the passenger seat. Icarus drove in silence through streets that grew progressively emptier, moving away from the city center toward the old district where historic buildings crumbled alongside new construction. He pulled into the circular drive of what looked like an abandoned mansion, all Gothic architecture and overgrown gardens. This is one of my properties, Icarus said as he turned off the engine. It's private. No one will disturb us here. Comforting, Thea muttered, but she followed him out of the car and up the steps to the massive front doors. Icarus produced a key, and the doors swung open with a groan of old hinges. Inside, the mansion was anything but abandoned. Rich carpets covered marble floors. Paintings that looked old and priceless lined the walls. Chandeliers glittered overhead, lit by what had to be hundreds of candles. It was like stepping back in time, into some aristocratic European estate. Welcome to one of my homes, Icarus said, watching her reaction. This is closer to my real life than anything you've seen so far. It's beautiful, Thea admitted, turning in a slow circle. But I still don't understand what you're trying to show me. Patience. Icarus led her deeper into the mansion, through hallways hung with tapestries and rooms filled with furniture that belonged in museums. Finally, he stopped in what appeared to be a library. Walls lined floor to ceiling with ancient books. He turned to face her and his expression was grave. What I'm about to tell you will change everything. You may not believe me at first. You may be frightened, but I'm asking you to listen and to trust your instincts. Can you do that? Thea's mouth was dry. Yes, I'm not human, Thea. I haven't been for a very long time. He held up a hand to forestall her protest. I know how it sounds, but it's the truth. I am what legends and folklore call a vampire. I've walked this earth for over 800 years. I've built empires and watched them fall. I've loved and lost more times than I can count. And I am, for better or worse, the king of my kind in this region. Silence filled the library. Thea stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for him to laugh and tell her it was a joke. But his expression remained serious, his eyes holding hers with unwavering intensity. You're insane, she whispered. I'm not. And you don't truly believe that, or you would have left already. Icarus took a step closer. Your instincts have been telling you something was different about me since the moment we met. The way I move, the coldness of my skin, the fact that I haven't aged in decades. You noticed all of it, even if you didn't want to acknowledge what it meant. Vampires aren't real. But even as she said it, Thea was remembering. The predatory grace, the too pale skin, the metallic scent underneath his cologne. The way her heart raced not just with attraction but with primal fear. They're not real. Watch. Icarus's eyes began to change, the gray darkening to black, then flickering with crimson. His lips parted and she saw fangs, actual fangs, extend from his canines. When he spoke, his voice held an echoing quality, as if multiple voices layered over one another. I am very real, Thea Winters, and I am very dangerous. Thea's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the floor, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be. But Icarus's face was transforming before her eyes, becoming something both terrible and beautiful, human and utterly other. Then, just as quickly, he changed back. His eyes returned to storm gray, the fangs receded, and he looked human again, or as human as he ever looked. He knelt beside her, careful to maintain distance, his expression concerned. Breathe, he said gently. You're in shock, breathe, Thea. She sucked in air, her lungs burning. This is impossible, it's not, it's simply hidden. My kind has lived alongside humanity for millennia, staying in the shadows, maintaining secrecy. Icarus remained kneeling, his hands resting on his thighs in a non-threatening posture. We have rules, laws that govern our interaction with humans. We cannot kill indiscriminately. We cannot turn humans without permission from our ruling council. We cannot expose our existence to the world at large. But you're exposing it to me. Thea's voice shook. Yes, because I need you to understand what I'm offering. What marrying me would truly mean. He met her eyes. I am the vampire king of this territory. My word is law among my kind, my power is absolute, and I am offering you a place at my side as my queen, my consort, my equal in all things. Thea's laugh was slightly hysterical. You want me to marry you, knowing you're a vampire, a creature that drinks blood and lives forever and probably sees me as nothing more than food. If I saw you as food, you would already be dead. Icarus's voice was sharp. I have not fed from an unwilling human in centuries. I have donors, people who give their blood freely in exchange for protection and compensation. I have never killed for sustenance, and I never will. He leaned forward slightly. And you are not just human to me, Thea. You are light in a world that has grown dark. You are goodness in a realm of power and politics. You are everything I have been searching for more years than you've been alive. How is that fair? Thea's eyes stung with tears. How is any of this fair? You're asking me to give up my entire life, my humanity, for what? To be some vampire's trophy wife? Never a trophy. A partner, a companion. Someone I can trust in a world full of enemies and false friends. Icarus's voice softened. I chose you because you are strong enough to stand beside me. Because you have the kindness my court lacks and the backbone to keep me honest. Because in 800 years I have never met anyone who made me want to share my immortal life with them. Until you. Thea covered her face with her hands. This was too much. All of it was too much. Vampires were real. The man who had proposed to her was a king of monsters. And some insane part of her was actually considering it. I need time, she said through her fingers. I need to think. Of course. Icarus stood smoothly and offered his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. I'll take you home. But Thea, he waited until she looked at him. Everything I've told you is the truth. And my offer still stands. Think about it, please. The drive back to her apartment was silent. Thea stared out the window, her mind spinning with impossible information. Vampires, kings, immortality. It was like something from a book, not her real life. But she couldn't deny what she'd seen, the transformation that had occurred right before her eyes. Icarus walked her to her building's entrance, a perfect gentleman despite being a creature of nightmare. Thank you for listening, he said. I know this is overwhelming, but I hope in time you'll see that I'm sincere. Why me? Thea asked again. There has to be more to it than kindness and stubbornness. Why really? Icarus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice held a vulnerability she hadn't heard before. Because I'm tired, Thea. Tired of being alone. Tired of empty centuries stretching ahead with no one to share them with. Tired of ruling a kingdom that feels more like a prison with every passing decade. I saw you in your shop, surrounded by life and growing things, giving away flowers you couldn't afford to lose. And I thought, maybe here is someone who could teach me to feel alive again. Maybe here is someone worth the risk of opening a heart I thought had turned to stone long ago. The raw honesty in his words broke something loose in her chest. I don't know if I can give you what you're looking for. I'm not asking for promises, just a chance. He reached out, hesitated, then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was feather-light, achingly tender. Think about it, that's all I ask. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night with that supernatural speed, leaving Thea standing alone on her building steps with her world turned upside down. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment of the evening, the restaurant, the mansion. The revelation that should have been impossible but felt in her bones undeniably true. Icarus was a vampire, a king, and he wanted her. Morning brought no clarity, only exhaustion and the beginning of a headache. Thea dragged herself to the shop and tried to focus on work, but her hands kept shaking as she trimmed stems and arranged petals. Every time the door opened, her heart jumped, expecting to see pale hair and storm-colored eyes, but Icarus didn't come. Days passed, and she heard nothing from him. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. It was as if he'd vanished completely, leaving her alone with her chaotic thoughts. A week after their dinner, Thea was closing up the shop when she noticed a man standing across the street. Not Icarus, this one was shorter, with dark hair and a cruel twist to his mouth. He was staring at her shop with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She locked the door quickly and left through the back entrance, but the prickling sensation between her shoulder blades told her she was being followed. Thea walked faster, her keys clutched between her fingers like a weapon. The street was busy enough that she should have felt safe, but the feeling of being hunted only intensified. She turned down an alley stupid, so stupid, hoping to cut through to a busier street. Footsteps echoed behind her. Thea started to run. A hand grabbed her arm and spun her around. The dark-haired man was there and his face was wrong, transforming into something monstrous. Fangs extended from his mouth and his eyes glowed with a sickly yellow light. "The king's little pet," he hissed. His voice was nothing like Icarus's. This was purely predatory, devoid of any humanity. "He thinks he can claim a human bride, break centuries of tradition? I'll send him your corpse as a wedding present." Terror flooded Thea's system. She tried to scream, but the vampire clamped a hand over her mouth, his grip bruising. He jerked her deeper into the alley, into shadows that seemed to swallow sound. "This is going to hurt," the vampire said, and his fangs descended toward her throat. Suddenly he was gone, ripped away from her with inhuman force. Thea stumbled back against the alley wall, gasping, and saw Icarus standing over the other vampire. His face was fully transformed now, monstrous and beautiful at once, and the rage rolling off him was palpable. "You dare," Icarus said, his voice that echoing multi-layered growl. "You dare touch what is mine?" The dark-haired vampire scrambled backward. "My lord, I was only challenging my authority, threatening my chosen consort, breaking our most sacred laws." Icarus moved with blinding speed, his hand wrapping around the other vampire's throat. "You've committed treason, Dmitri, and the penalty for treason is death." "Please," Dmitri choked. "I was following Cassius's orders." "He said you were making a mistake," he said. "Cassius." Icarus's eyes blazed brighter. "He dares much, it seems. But you, Dmitri, made the choice to follow those orders. You put your hands on her, you frightened her. For that alone, you deserve what comes next." What happened next was too fast for Thea to fully process. One moment Dmitri was there, begging for mercy. The next, he was dust, crumbling to nothing in Icarus's grip. The wind scattered his remains across the dirty alley floor. Icarus turned to her, his face shifting back to human, concern replacing rage. "Are you hurt?" Thea could only shake her head, her voice lost somewhere in her throat. "Did he bite you? Scratch you? Any injury at all? And no, you got here in time." She was trembling violently now, adrenaline and shock catching up with her. Icarus moved slowly, carefully, as if approaching a frightened animal. "I'm going to touch you now, just to make sure you're all right. Is that okay?" She nodded, and his cool hands cupped her face, tilting it gently from side to side as he examined her. His touch was impossibly gentle, at odds with the violence she'd just witnessed. Satisfied that she was uninjured, he pulled her against his chest, one arm wrapping protectively around her shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said into her hair. "I'm so sorry. I should have anticipated this, should have had guards on you from the moment I revealed myself. This is my fault." "Who was he?" Thea asked, her voice muffled against his shirt. "A member of my court, one of many who oppose my choice to marry a human." Icarus's arms tightened around her. "There are those among my kind who view humans as nothing more than food or playthings. They see my desire to elevate you as weakness, a betrayal of our traditions. They'll keep coming for me. Not if I make it clear that touching you means death. Not if I show them that you are under my protection now and always." He pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "But that means you need to stay close to me, Thea. It means accepting guards, accepting my protection. It means letting me keep you safe. I haven't agreed to marry you, I know, but that won't stop my enemies from using you against me. The moment I showed interest in you, you became a target." His expression was anguished. "I've put you in danger simply by existing in your world. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Thea's legs finally gave out completely. Icarus caught her easily, lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "I'm taking you somewhere safe," he said. "We can discuss details later, but right now I need to know you're protected." She should have argued, should have demanded he take her home. But the terror of that moment when Dimitri's fangs had been descending toward her throat was too fresh. She nodded against Icarus's shoulder and let him carry her to his car. He drove to the mansion she'd visited before, carrying her inside and up a sweeping staircase to a bedroom that looked like something from a period drama. All rich fabrics and antique furniture with a bed large enough for 4 people. "This is one of the guest rooms," Icarus said, setting her carefully on the bed. "You'll be safe here. The mansion is warded against intrusion and I have guards stationed at every entrance. No one will harm you under this roof. You have my word." "What happens now?" Thea asked. "Now you rest. Recover from the shock. In the morning, we'll discuss your options." Icarus moved toward the door, then paused. "There's a bathroom through that door, and the closet should have clothes that will fit. If you need anything at all, there's a phone on the nightstand. Press 1, and it will connect you directly to me. You're leaving, you've been through a trauma, you need space and time to process." His smile was sad. And despite what you might think, I'm not going to take advantage of your vulnerability. Rest, Thea. We'll talk tomorrow. He left, closing the door softly behind him, and Thea was alone in a vampire's mansion, her life irrevocably changed. She did rest eventually, though sleep was fractured and full of nightmares. When morning light filtered through the heavy curtains, Thea woke to find a tray of breakfast on the nightstand: toast, fruit, coffee, all still warm. A note beside it read, "Take your time. I'll be in the library when you're ready." Thea ate mechanically, then showered and found clothes in the closet that fit perfectly. Someone had anticipated her needs with unsettling accuracy. When she was dressed and as ready as she'd ever be, she made her way down to the library. Icarus was there as promised, standing by the window with a book in his hands. He looked up when she entered, and relief flooded his face. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like my life is a bad horror movie." Thea sank into one of the leather chairs. "But alive, so there's that. I'm glad." Icarus set down his book and took the chair across from her. "We need to discuss your safety moving forward. I'm not marrying you just because some vampire tried to kill me. I'm not asking you to, but I am asking you to let me protect you, at least until I've dealt with the threat." His expression hardened. "Dimitri mentioned Cassius. He's a member of my council, one of the oldest and most powerful vampires in the region. If he's orchestrating attacks against you, it means there's a larger conspiracy at play. One I need to root out before anyone else gets hurt. Why would he care so much about who you marry? Because tradition and power are everything to our kind. A vampire king taking a human consort is unprecedented in recent centuries. It suggests that humans are equal to vampires, worthy of standing beside us rather than beneath us. For vampires like Cassius, who view humans as lesser beings, that idea is intolerable." Icarus leaned forward. "If I succeed in marrying you, it could change everything for human-vampire relations. It could pave the way for a future where our two species coexist as equals rather than predator and prey. But that threatens those who benefit from the current power structure." Thea absorbed this slowly. "So I'm not just a bride, I'm a political statement. You're a person I care about who happens to have political implications." His voice softened. "I won't pretend there aren't strategic benefits to our union. But that's not why I want to marry you, Thea. I want to marry you because you make me feel something I haven't felt in centuries. Because you see life as precious and beautiful, and I've forgotten how to do that. Because I want to spend whatever time we have, whether you choose mortality, or I offer you immortality, learning to see the world through your eyes again." "You can't just say things like that," Thea whispered, her eyes stinging. "Why not? It's the truth." Icarus reached across the space between them, his hand extended, palm up in invitation. "I'm not asking for an answer today or tomorrow. I'm just asking you to stay here, where I can keep you safe and give us a chance to know each other, really know each other. No more secrets, no more carefully curated dinners. Just us, learning whether this feeling between us is real or simply the result of circumstance." Thea stared at his outstretched hand. Accepting it felt like accepting everything: the danger, the politics, the impossible reality of vampires and kings. But the alternative was going back to her apartment alone, waiting for the next attack, living in fear. And beneath the terror and confusion, there was something else, a pull toward this strange, immortal man, a curiosity about what it might mean to stand beside him, a tiny, treacherous spark of feeling that had been growing since the moment he'd walked into her flower shop. She placed her hand in his. Icarus's fingers closed around hers, cool and strong, and his smile was like sunrise. "Thank you. You won't regret this, I promise." The days that followed took on a surreal quality. Thea stayed in the mansion, surrounded by luxury and protected by guards she rarely saw but always felt watching. Icarus was with her as often as his duties allowed, which turned out to be more often than she expected. He showed her his world slowly, carefully, introduced her to members of his household staff, a mix of humans and vampires who served him with a loyalty that bordered on reverence. Took her through the mansion's many rooms, each one full of treasures collected over centuries. Told her stories of his long life, of the things he'd seen and the people he'd loved and lost. In turn, Thea talked about her grandmother, who had taught her everything about flowers and kindness. About her parents, who had died when she was young in a car accident she barely remembered. About the shop and her dreams of someday expanding it, of maybe teaching classes on flower arranging or starting a community garden. "You could do all of that," Icarus said one evening as they sat in the mansion's conservatory, surrounded by plants that looked tropical and impossible. "With my resources, you could do anything you wanted." "That feels like cheating," Thea admitted. "Like I wouldn't have earned it." "You've already earned it through years of hard work and dedication. Accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom." He plucked a flower from a nearby vine and offered it to her. "Besides, Wouldn't it be better to spend your time creating and teaching rather than struggling to pay rent? She couldn't argue with that logic. 2 weeks into her stay, Icarus asked her to attend a meeting of his council. I want them to see you, he explained. To understand that you're under my protection and that any move against you is a move against me. It's a risk but a necessary one. Thea dressed carefully for the occasion in a gown that had been delivered to her room, deep, red, elegant, with a neckline that hinted at strength rather than vulnerability. When she descended the main staircase and saw Icarus waiting at the bottom, his expression told her she'd made the right choice. You look like a queen, he said simply. I'm not, though. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But you will be. There was no doubt in his voice, only certainty. Come, let's remind my council of their place. The council chamber was deep in the mansion's lower levels, a vast room with vaulted ceilings and walls of ancient stone. A massive table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs occupied by some of the most beautiful and terrifying beings Thea had ever seen. All vampires, their pale skin and regal bearing making them look like fallen angels or ancient gods. At the head of the table sat an older vampire with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. He watched Thea enter with undisguised contempt. This is the human? He asked, his voice dripping disdain. This is what you would elevate above our kind. This, Icarus said, his voice hard as steel, is Thea Winters, my chosen consort and future queen of this territory. You will address her with respect, Cassius, or you will answer to me. Cassius's laugh was cold. You cannot be serious. She's human, fragile, mortal. She'll be dead in a blink while we continue on unchanged. Why tie yourself to something so temporary? Because some things are worth the pain of their loss. Icarus moved to stand behind Thea, his hands resting on her shoulders in a gesture that was both possessive and protective. Because she has qualities our kind has forgotten: compassion, generosity, the ability to see worth in things beyond power and eternity. Because I choose her, and as your king, my choice is final. Your choice endangers us all. Another vampire spoke up, this one female with hair like spun gold. The old laws exist for a reason. Humans are food, not equals. If you marry her, what's to stop every vampire from taking a human mate? What happens to our secrecy then? What happens is we evolve, Icarus replied. We stop hiding and start building something better. A world where vampires and humans coexist openly, with laws that protect both species. Where we're partners rather than predators. Fantasy, Cassius spat. Humans would hunt us to extinction the moment they knew we existed, or they would adapt as they always have. Icarus's hands tightened slightly on Thea's shoulders. But this debate is pointless. I'm not here to argue philosophy with you. I'm here to deliver a message. Thea Winters is under my protection. Anyone who harms her, threatens her, or even looks at her wrong will answer directly to me. Am I understood? Silence fell over the chamber. The vampires exchanged glances, calculating, assessing. Finally Cassius stood. You've made your position clear, my lord. But know this, there are many who will never accept a human queen, who see your choice as a betrayal of everything our kind stands for. He inclined his head in a mockery of a bow. I hope she's worth the war you're courting. He swept from the chamber, and several other vampires followed. Those who remained bowed their heads in acknowledgement of Icarus's authority. But Thea could see the reservations in their eyes. When they were alone, Thea let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That went well. About as well as I expected. Icarus turned her to face him. I'm sorry you had to see that. My kind can be unpleasant when their worldview is challenged. Cassius is going to be a problem. Cassius has always been a problem. But now he's a problem I can address directly. His expression darkened. He as good as admitted he's behind the attacks on you. That's treason. I have grounds to move against him. What does that mean? More dust in alleyways, probably. Icarus touched her face gently. Does that frighten you? Knowing I'll kill to protect you. Thea thought about it. About Dmitri crumbling to dust. About the casual violence that seemed inherent to vampire society. It should, she admitted. But mostly I'm grateful. Is that wrong? It's human. And I find I treasure that about you. That night, Thea couldn't sleep. She wandered the mansion's halls, trailing her fingers along walls that had stood for centuries, looking at portraits of people long dead. She found herself in the conservatory again, drawn to the living things that somehow thrived under Icarus' care. He found her there, standing among the orchids, her fingers gentle on a white petal. Can't sleep? He asked softly. Too much on my mind. Thea didn't look away from the flower. This is all so much bigger than I thought. Not just about you and me, but about changing the entire relationship between our species. That's terrifying. It is. Icarus moved to stand beside her. And if it's too much, if you want to walk away, I'll understand. I'll still protect you, still make sure you're safe. But I won't hold you to something that frightens you this much. That's the thing, though. Thea finally looked at him. I'm not sure I want to walk away. These past 2 weeks, getting to know you, seeing your world, it's been strange and scary, but also amazing. You're not what I expected. You're kind and thoughtful, and you actually listen when I talk. You treat me like an equal even though you could snap me like a twig, and she hesitated. I think I might be falling for you. Which is insane because you're a vampire king and I'm just a florist, but I can't help how I feel. Icarus's expression transformed, hope and joy and something deeper shining in his eyes. You're not just anything, you're extraordinary. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in both hands. I've been trying so hard not to rush you, not to let my feelings overwhelm yours. But Thea, I've been falling for you since the moment you threw my check in the trash. Since you looked at me like I was just another entitled rich man and refused to be impressed. You've brought light into my darkness, warmth into my cold existence. I would burn down my entire kingdom before I let anything harm you. That's terrifying and romantic at the same time, Thea whispered. Welcome to loving a vampire. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. May I kiss you? In answer, Thea rose onto her toes and closed the distance between them. Kissing Icarus was like nothing she'd experienced. His lips were cool but soft, his touch gentle despite the strength she knew he possessed. He kissed her like she was precious, breakable, sacred. Like she was the most valuable thing in his 800-year existence. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Icarus rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said, not because of politics or protection. Just because I love you, and I want to spend every moment I can, mortal or otherwise, at your side. And this time, Thea didn't hesitate. Yes. The word had barely left her lips before Icarus was kissing her again. Deeper this time, urgent and joyful. When they finally broke apart, he was actually laughing, the sound bright and young and full of happiness. Yes, he repeated as if he couldn't quite believe it. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll be your wife, your partner, your equal. I'll stand beside you and face down your grumpy counsel and learn what it means to be a queen. Thea smiled. I might not be any good at it, but I'll try. You'll be magnificent. Icarus spun her around and she found herself laughing too, giddy and terrified and more alive than she'd felt in years. How soon can we do this? Shouldn't we date first? Have a proper engagement? We've been living together for 2 weeks. I've shown you every dark corner of my life and you've chosen to stay anyway. That's better than dating. He set her down but kept his arms around her. But if you want a traditional courtship, I can give you that. Flowers and chocolates and awkward dinners with friends. I think we're past traditional. Thea touched the sharp line of his jaw, marveling that she was allowed to do this, to touch him freely. But maybe we could have an actual wedding? Something more than just signing papers? Anything you want. We can have a human ceremony and a vampire one. Invite everyone who matters in both our worlds. Show them that this union is real and binding in all ways that count. His expression grew serious. But we need to move quickly. The moment we announce our engagement, Cassius will make his move. I'd rather we be married. With all the protections that offers before that happens.
What protections?
In vampire society, a bonded pair shares power. You would have access to my strength, my abilities, my resources. Anyone who harms you would be harming me directly. It's the strongest protection I can offer. He hesitated. There's also the matter of immortality. Thea's breath caught. You're offering to turn me. Not immediately, not unless you want it. But eventually, yes. I won't lie to you. Watching you age and die while I remain unchanged would break me. But that choice is yours to make on your timeline. Whether you decide tomorrow or 50 years from now, I'll respect your decision. The weight of that choice settled on Thea's shoulders. Immortality, forever. Never aging, never dying, watching the world change around her for centuries. It was too big to contemplate right now, too massive for her tired brain to process. Can we table that conversation for later? She asked. One impossible thing at a time. Of course. Icarus kissed her forehead. For now, let's focus on the wedding and surviving whatever Cassius has planned. Everything else can wait. Planning a wedding, especially one that needed to happen quickly, turned out to be both easier and harder than Thea expected. Easier because Icarus had resources to make anything happen instantly. Harder because every decision carried political weight she hadn't anticipated. The venue needed to be neutral territory, acceptable to both vampires and humans. The guest list had to include key members of the vampire court while not overwhelming the few humans in Thea's life. The ceremony itself needed to blend traditions from both cultures in a way that honored each without offending either. Thea found herself grateful for Mira, who took the news of vampires and marriage proposals with shocking equanimity. I've suspected supernatural stuff existed for years, Mira said, helping Thea choose between dress designs. And honestly, a vampire king is basically the ultimate romance novel hero. I'm just mad you didn't tell me sooner. I was processing. For 2 weeks? It's been a busy 2 weeks. Thea held up a sketch of a gown that looked like starlight and shadow. What about this one? Perfect. Very vampire queen meets fairy princess. Mira leaned back against the couch in Thea's suite. So when do I get to meet him properly? The whole "hi, I'm marrying a vampire" phone call was a bit lacking in details. Tonight, actually. He wants to have dinner with you. Make sure you approve. Mira's eyes went wide. He cares if I approve? You're my best friend. Your opinion matters. Thea set down the sketches. Besides, I need you in my corner for this. The vampire world is so different from anything I know. I need something familiar to hold on to. Always, Mira promised, even if your fiancé has fangs. Dinner was less awkward than Thea feared. Icarus charmed Mira within minutes, asking intelligent questions about her work as a graphic designer and actually listening to the answers. By the time dessert arrived, Mira was fully on board with the marriage, though she did threaten Icarus with creative violence if he ever hurt her best friend. I like her, Icarus said later, after Mira had left. She's a fierce, loyal. You chose well. She chose me, actually, back in college. Decided I looked lonely and adopted me on the spot. Thea smiled at the memory. I don't know what I would have done without her these past years. Then we'll make sure she's taken care of. Protected. Any friend of yours is under my protection as well. Icarus pulled Thea against his side, and she curled into his coolness, marveling at how natural it felt. 3 more days until the wedding. Are you nervous? Terrified? Excited? Waiting for something to go wrong? She tilted her head to look up at him. Is it bad that I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop? Smart, given the circumstances. But I promise you, I'm doing everything in my power to make sure your wedding day is perfect. His arm tightened around her. My guards are watching Cassius constantly. If he so much as breathes wrong, I'll know about it. But Cassius, it turned out, was more subtle than they'd anticipated. The attack came not at the wedding itself, but the night before. Thea was in her suite, trying on her dress one final time when the lights went out. Not just in her room, in the entire mansion. Emergency lights clicked on immediately, bathing everything in eerie red, and somewhere in the distance an alarm began to wail. Thea's door burst open and Icarus stood there, his face fully transformed, eyes blazing crimson. Stay behind me. What's happening? Cassius. He's brought an army. Icarus grabbed her hand and pulled her into the hallway. Guards materialized around them, forming a protective barrier as they moved through the mansion. He's challenging my rule directly, making his play for the throne. How many? Enough to be a problem. They descended the main staircase at inhuman speed, Thea cradled against Icarus's chest. He's assembled every vampire who opposes our union, promised them power in a new regime. He's banking on the fact that I won't kill my entire court to keep you safe. He's wrong, isn't he? Icarus's smile was sharp and terrible. Completely. They emerged into the mansion's main hall to find it transformed into a battlefield. Vampires fought everywhere, those loyal to Icarus against those following Cassius. Blood splattered the ancient walls, and the sounds of combat were deafening. In the center of it all stood Cassius, silver-haired and smiling like a predator. Icarus, he called out. Come to watch your kingdom fall. Come to watch you die, Icarus replied calmly. He set Thea down behind a column, cupped her face in both hands. Stay here. Don't move, don't draw attention. I'll end this quickly. Be careful. I'm 800 years old, beloved. I've survived longer than most civilizations. He kissed her once, hard and claiming. Wait for me. Then he was gone, moving faster than her eyes could track. Thea watched from her hiding place as Icarus engaged Cassius directly. The two vampires moving in a blur of violence that was somehow also beautiful. Ancient power against ancient power, king against challenger, each blow strong enough to shatter stone. Around them, the battle raged. Thea recognized some of Icarus's guards. They were outnumbered but fighting with a ferocity born of loyalty and love for their king. She saw one go down, saw another turn to dust, and her heart clenched with horror. Then she saw the vampire creeping toward Icarus's back, blade in hand, eyes fixed on the vulnerable space between his shoulder blades. Thea didn't think. She just moved, grabbing a piece of broken furniture and throwing it with all her strength. It hit the attacking vampire in the head, not enough to hurt but enough to distract. The vampire turned toward her, snarling, and she realized her mistake too late. But Icarus was faster. He appeared between Thea and the attacker, and his hand punched through the vampire's chest, emerging with dust where a heart should have been. The vampire crumbled, and Icarus rounded on Thea with blazing eyes. I told you to stay hidden. He was going to stab you. I would have sensed him. But the anger in his voice was fear, and Thea understood. She'd put herself in danger, distracted him at a critical moment. Before either could say more, Cassius attacked, and Icarus had to spin away to counter. The fight seemed to go on forever. though it probably lasted only minutes. Finally, Icarus got the upper hand, his fingers wrapping around Cassius's throat, lifting the older vampire off the ground. "You've lost," Icarus said, his voice echoing with power. "Surrender or die." "I don't surrender to weaklings who love humans," Cassius spat. Blood ran from his mouth and his eyes held only hatred. "Kill me, make me a martyr. See how your court responds," gladly. Icarus's hand tightened and Cassius began to crumble. "For threatening my mate, for attacking my home, for betraying your oaths, I, Icarus Falke, king of the Northern Territories, sentence you to final death." Cassius turned to dust, his remains scattering across the blood-stained floor. The fighting stopped immediately. Every vampire in the hall dropped to their knees, heads bowed in submission. "Anyone else want to challenge my choice of queen?" Icarus asked, his voice carrying to every corner. Silence answered him. "Good. Clean this up, tend to the wounded. And prepare for a wedding, because tomorrow I'm marrying the human I love, and anyone who has a problem with that can join Cassius." He crossed to Thea and pulled her against him, his face shifting back to human, his body trembling slightly with aftershocks of violence and fear. "You terrified me," he whispered into her hair. "Please don't ever do that again. You're welcome for saving your life, stubborn woman." But he was smiling as he said it, and his hold on her was achingly gentle. "Come, let's get you cleaned up and rested. You're getting married tomorrow." The wedding took place in the mansion's gardens, under a canopy of stars and surrounded by flowers that Thea had arranged herself. She wore the gown of starlight and shadow, her hair crowned with roses from her own shop. Mira stood beside her as maid of honor, looking beautiful and slightly overwhelmed by the number of vampires in attendance. Icarus waited at the altar in a black suit that made him look like a prince from a fairy tale, his pale hair catching moonlight, his eyes full of love and promise. When Thea walked down the aisle on the arm of one of Icarus's oldest friends, a vampire named Constantine, who had graciously offered to stand in as father figure, she felt like she was floating. The ceremony blended human and vampire traditions. They exchanged vows in both English and the ancient language of Icarus's kind. They shared blood, his from a ceremonial chalice, hers from a small cut on her palm that he licked closed with supernatural healing. They were bound with red silk cords that symbolized the joining of their lives, and crowned with silver circlets that marked them as king and consort. When the officiant, a vampire elder whose age was measured in millennia, pronounced them married, Icarus kissed Thea like she was air and he'd been drowning. The assembled crowd erupted in cheers, vampire and human voices mixing, and Thea felt tears of joy streaming down her face. "My wife," Icarus murmured against her lips. "My queen, my heart, my husband," Thea replied. "My king, my forever." The reception lasted until dawn, when the vampires had to retreat from the coming sun. Icarus and Thea stayed up to watch the sunrise from the conservatory, wrapped in each other's arms, speaking in soft voices about the future. "What happens now?" Thea asked. "Do I move into the mansion permanently? Do we live here, or do you have other places?" "I have estates all over the world. We can live anywhere you want, though I'd prefer somewhere with good protection until we're certain the threat from Cassius's followers has passed." Icarus played with her hair absently. "I thought perhaps we could split our time, summers in the Italian villa, winters in the London townhouse, spring and fall here, so you can keep your shop running." "My shop?" Thea had almost forgotten about it in the chaos of the past weeks. "I can't just abandon it." "I'm not asking you to. In fact, I've had some thoughts about that." He pulled out his phone and showed her architectural drawings. "What if we expanded, turned winter's blooms into a flagship location, then opened branches across the city? You could hire staff to run the day-to-day while you focus on the creative aspects, arranging, teaching, developing the business. You could even start that community garden you mentioned." Thea stared at the plans, at the beautiful expansion of her dreams rendered in precise detail. "You did this? When?" "I've had people working on it since our first date. I wanted to show you that marrying me doesn't mean giving up your passions. It means having the resources to pursue them fully." He set the phone aside. "What do you think?" "I think you're too good to be real." Thea kissed him softly. "I think I'm the luckiest woman alive, even if my husband technically isn't alive. I think I want to build this life with you, one day at a time, one flower at a time." "And immortality?" Icarus asked carefully. "Have you thought about that?" "I have, and I think maybe someday, not now. I want to experience some of my human life as your wife first. Want to grow older knowing you're there, stable and constant. But eventually, yes. I want forever with you, all the time you'll give me." Icarus's smile could have lit the entire city. "Forever it is." Months passed. Thea settled into her new life with surprising ease, dividing her time between the mansion and her expanded flower shops. Icarus proved to be everything she'd hoped for in a husband: attentive, supportive, endlessly patient with her questions about vampire society. He introduced her to other vampire leaders from around the world, helped her navigate the complex politics of his kind, and never once made her feel less than for being human. The vampire court came to accept her, grudgingly at first, then with genuine warmth as they saw how happy she made their king. Thea used her position to push for reforms: better treatment of human donors, stricter laws against unauthorized feeding, the establishment of a council that included both human and vampire representatives to address interspecies issues. Some nights, when Icarus was holding her close, and they were watching the stars from whatever estate they were currently calling home, Thea marveled at how her life had changed. From a struggling florist to a vampire queen. From someone who couldn't pay rent to someone who commanded resources beyond imagination. But the greatest change was in her heart. She'd learned to love this strange, ancient, beautiful creature who had walked into her shop and changed everything. Who had seen past her poverty to her worth, past her humanity to her strength. 1 year after their wedding, on the anniversary of the day they met, Icarus took Thea back to her flower shop. It had been completely renovated now, expanded into the neighboring buildings, with a staff of 20 and a wait list for custom arrangements that stretched months into the future. "Close your eyes," Icarus said as they stood outside the front door. Thea obeyed, and he led her inside. She heard shuffling, whispered voices, suppressed giggles. When he told her to open her eyes, she found the shop transformed into a garden wonderland. Flowers everywhere, every species she loved, arranged in cascading displays that took her breath away. And in the center of it all, Mira and the shop staff wearing matching grins. "What is this?" Thea asked. "A celebration," Icarus said. He dropped to one knee again and pulled out a new ring. Not the massive diamond from that first proposal, but something else. A band of twisted silver and gold set with a single perfect ruby. "1 year ago you turned me down. Twice. Because I was a stranger who hadn't earned your trust or your love. So now I'm asking again, knowing everything we've built together. Thea Winters, love of my eternal life, will you marry me? Again? Every year for as many years as you'll have me?" Thea was crying and laughing at the same time. "You dramatic, ridiculous vampire. We're already married, I know. But I want to keep asking. Keep earning your yes. Keep proving that you made the right choice that day in the alley when I saved you. That night in the conservatory when you kissed me. That moment at the altar when you bound your life to mine." He slipped the ring onto her finger, joining the wedding band already there. "Will you marry me, Thea?" "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, today, tomorrow, every day for the rest of forever. Yes." He stood and kissed her as their friends cheered, and Thea knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Not just in accepting his proposal, but in opening her heart to the impossible. In taking a chance on a strange, beautiful man who had offered her the world and asked only for her love in return. Years would pass. Thea would eventually accept the gift of immortality, choosing to stand beside Icarus not just for a human lifetime but for eternity. She would become a true vampire queen, beloved by both species, known for her wisdom and kindness, and the flowers that bloomed wherever she walked. But that was the future. In this moment, she was simply Thea, wife of Icarus, former poor florist who had turned down a vampire king's proposal twice because she'd needed to know who he truly was. And now she knew. He was her partner, her protector, her greatest love. He was the one who had seen her worth when she had nothing to offer but herself. He was the one who had waited for her to be ready, who had earned her trust and her heart one day at a time. He was hers, and she was his forever. The shop was full of laughter and light, of friends and flowers and the sweet promise of eternity. Icarus held her close, his cool hand cradling her face, his eyes full of all the love he'd accumulated over 800 years of existence. "I would have waited longer," he whispered. 100 years if that's what you needed. Because you, Thea Winters, are worth every moment of patience, every second of longing. You are the sun in my darkness, the warmth in my cold existence. You are everything." "Sweet talker," Thea said, but her voice was thick with tears. "You're going to make me cry at my own anniversary party. That's my right as your husband." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "To make you laugh, make you cry, make you feel loved every moment of every day. It's in our vows." "I don't remember that part. It was in the vampire vows. You probably weren't paying attention. I was too busy looking at your face. Understandable. I'm devastatingly handsome." Thea laughed and pulled him down for another kiss, this one deep and claiming and full of promise. Around them, their friends and staff pretended not to watch, giving them this moment of private joy in a public space. When they finally pulled apart, Icarus rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he said quietly. For taking a chance on a stranger with a ridiculous proposal. For seeing past the wealth and power to the lonely man underneath. For loving me despite all my darkness. Thank you for not giving up after I turned you down. For showing me who you really were. For being patient while I figured out my own heart. Thea touched his face gently. And for the record, I don't love you despite your darkness. I love you because of it. Because you've lived through centuries of shadow and still found it in yourself to be kind, to be gentle, to see worth in a human woman with dirt under her fingernails and more dreams than sense. Those dreams are becoming reality now. Everything you wanted, the expanded shop, the community gardens, the teaching programs. You're changing lives, Thea, making the world more beautiful one flower at a time. We're doing it together. She laced her fingers through his. That's what marriage means, right? Building something together. Becoming more than the sum of our parts. Exactly. Icarus kissed her joined hands. And we have forever to keep building, to keep growing, to keep falling more in love with each passing year. Forever, Thea repeated, and the word no longer frightened her. Instead, it felt like a promise, like hope made solid, like the best adventure she could possibly imagine. The party continued around them, but for a moment they were the only two people in the world. A vampire king and his human queen. A man who had lived 800 years, and the woman who had taught him to feel alive again. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and chosen to build a life and an eternity together. Outside, night was falling, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Inside, surrounded by flowers and love and laughter, Thea Winters, now Thea Falke, vampire queen, former florist, beloved wife, smiled up at her husband and knew with absolute certainty that every choice she'd made had led her here. To this moment, to this man, to this beautiful, impossible, perfect life. She had turned down his proposal twice, and thank God she had. Because in those rejections, in that insistence on knowing who he truly was, she had given them something more precious than acceptance. She had given them truth, understanding, a foundation built on respect and genuine connection rather than wealth or convenience. And now, standing in her flower shop surrounded by everything she loved, Thea understood what Icarus had known from the beginning. They weren't just husband and wife. They were soulmates, partners, two halves of a whole that transcended the boundaries between human and vampire, mortal and immortal, ordinary and extraordinary. They were forever, and forever, Thea had learned, was just beginning.